My name is Vanessa Price, and at 28 years old, I learned that family cruelty sometimes carries its own consequences. The Thanksgiving dinner table stretched elegantly before me, decorated with expensive china and crystal glasses that caught the chandelier light. 12 family members sat eating, laughing, enjoying my Aunt Patricia's catered feast. I stood in the kitchen doorway, stomach growling, waiting. "Vanessa, you'll eat after everyone finishes," Patricia had announced when I'd arrived. "We have exactly 12 place settings, and I'm not bringing out the everyday dishes for unexpected guests." I wasn't unexpected. I'd been invited 3 weeks ago. But Patricia had conveniently forgotten to include me in the count she'd given the caterer. My cousins Brittany and Hayden smirked from their seats, enjoying my humiliation. Uncle Charles barely glanced up from his plate. This wasn't new. Since my mother died 5 years ago, Patricia had treated me like a burden rather than family. My mother had been Patricia's younger sister, the one who'd married for love instead of money, who'd chosen teaching over corporate ambition. Patricia had never forgiven her for it. Now I stood watching my relatives feast, knowing I'd get whatever scraps remained. The humiliation burned, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned years ago not to give Patricia the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. What Patricia didn't know was that earlier that day, I'd signed papers that would change everything. Papers her own father had left me. My grandfather, William Price, had died 6 months ago at 93. Brilliant businessman, ruthless negotiator, builder of Price Industries, a manufacturing empire worth $1.2 billion. He'd founded the company 50 years ago, grown it methodically, diversified intelligently. By the time he died, Price Industries employed 12,000 people across 7 states. Patricia had assumed she'd inherit everything. She was the eldest child, the one who'd married Jeffrey Morton. Another wealthy family, strategic alliance, all the right connections. She lived in the mansion, drove the luxury cars, wore the designer clothes. She'd spent decades positioning herself as William's heir apparent. But my grandfather had been more complicated than Patricia understood. He'd valued integrity over ambition, authenticity over performance. My mother had been his favorite, the daughter who'd chosen purpose over profit, who'd maintained principles even when they cost her financially. When she died of cancer, leaving me alone at 23, grandfather had taken notice. Not of Patricia's grudging obligation toward me, but of how I'd handled grief and hardship, how I'd finished my MBA while working full-time, how I'd built a small consulting business helping nonprofits with strategic planning, how I'd lived modestly but purposefully. He'd called me to his office 2 weeks before he died. "Vanessa, I need to discuss my will. Patricia believes she's inheriting Price Industries. She's wrong." My heart had stopped. "Grandfather, let me finish. Patricia is brilliant at spending money and maintaining appearances. But she has no vision, no integrity, no understanding of what actually makes a business succeed. She sees Price Industries as her personal bank account." He'd handed me a folder. "I'm leaving you controlling interest. 51% of company stock, transferred upon my death with a 6-month waiting period." "Why the waiting period?" asked, stunned. "Because I want you to understand what you're inheriting before you have to defend it. The lawyers will contact you 6 months after my death with final paperwork. Until then, don't tell Patricia. Let her reveal who she really is." His eyes had been sharp, knowing. "She'll treat you exactly as she treats anyone she considers beneath her. Document everything. You'll need evidence of her character when she challenges the inheritance." He'd been right. The 6 months since his death had been brutal. Patricia, believing she'd inherit billions, had become even more dismissive and cruel. She'd stopped inviting me to family events entirely until my Uncle Charles, who was kinder but weak, had insisted I be included in Thanksgiving. Patricia had complied but made sure I understood my place. No seat at the table. No plate prepared. Just humiliating visibility of my exclusion while she played generous host to everyone else. That morning the lawyers had called. "Ms. Price, we're ready to finalize the transfer. Can you come to the office today?" I'd gone immediately, before Thanksgiving dinner, before Patricia could suspect anything. The paperwork was extensive. Stock certificates, board appointments, operational control documents. I'd signed everything, hands steady, heart pounding. "You're now majority owner and CEO of Price Industries," the lead attorney confirmed. "The transfer is effective immediately. The board will be notified Monday morning. Ms. Patricia Morton currently sits on the board as minority shareholder. She'll be informed of the change in leadership at that time." I'd driven to Patricia's house directly from the lawyer's office, knowing what awaited me but needing to see her true nature one final time before everything changed. Now I stood in her kitchen, watching her entertain guests who didn't know I existed beyond being the poor relation standing awkwardly by the door. Patricia's laughter carried from the dining room, sharp, performative, designed to signal her superiority. The meal stretched endlessly. 2 hours of watching people eat, of feeling invisible, of hearing Patricia's cutting comments whenever she passed through the kitchen. "Oh, Vanessa, still here. I forgot you were waiting. We're having such a lovely time." Finally, the guests moved to the living room for dessert and coffee. Patricia gestured dismissively toward the dining room. "You can eat now. There might be some turkey left, maybe a roll or two. Clean up when you're finished." I walked to the table, looking at the remnants of the feast. Dried turkey scraps, cold vegetables, congealed gravy. They'd eaten everything good, left exactly what she'd promised, leftovers that would barely constitute a meal. I stood there for a moment, letting the humiliation sink in one final time. Not because I intended to accept it, but because I wanted to remember exactly how Patricia had treated me when she'd thought I was powerless. Then I pulled out my phone and photographed the table. The scraped clean serving dishes, the pathetic remains of the feast, the obvious evidence of being served last and least. I sent the photo to my lawyer with a simple message. Documentation of character, as grandfather suggested. Patricia appeared in the doorway, glass of wine in hand. "Are you actually taking pictures of leftovers? How pathetic. This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything, Vanessa. You're so focused on being a victim that you can't see opportunities." "Interesting perspective," I said quietly. "Tell me, Aunt Patricia, what opportunities do you see in your future?" She laughed, the sound cruel and satisfied. "I see controlling a billion-dollar company for starters. Grandfather's will goes through probate next week. Finally, I'll have the resources I deserve after decades of waiting." "You've been waiting for your father to die so you could inherit his money?" I kept my voice level, my phone still recording, video now, capturing everything. "Don't be naive. Everyone was waiting. He was 93, for God's sake. He had a good life, built something valuable, and now it's time for the next generation to take control." She sipped her wine. "I'll finally be able to run Price Industries properly. Modernize it, maximize profits, maybe sell it entirely if the right offer comes along. Sell it. Grandfather spent 50 years building that company. And it's worth over $1 billion because of that work. But it's time to cash out, invest in something with better returns. Manufacturing is dying anyway." She waved her hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand business strategy. You help nonprofits write grants. That's adorable, but it's not real business." I nodded slowly, still recording. "So your plan is to inherit Price Industries, either run it into the ground through poor management or sell it entirely, probably laying off thousands of employees in the process, just to maximize your personal profit? That's called smart business, Vanessa. Something you'd know if you'd pursued a real career instead of playing do-gooder with your little consulting thing." She refilled her wine glass. "Now eat your leftovers and go home. The adults have actual conversation to conduct." I stopped recording and smiled. "Actually, Aunt Patricia, I need to tell you something. About those leftovers and about your inheritance." Patricia's expression shifted slightly, still smug but with an edge of irritation. "What are you babbling about? This morning I met with grandfather's lawyers. The 6-month waiting period ended, and the will was finalized." Kept my voice steady, professional. Grandfather left you exactly what he thought you deserved. A trust fund generating about $200,000 annually. Enough to maintain your lifestyle comfortably if you budget responsibly. Yes, I know about the trust fund. That's my discretionary money. The real inheritance is Price Industries, which he left to me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email from the lawyers, the official documentation. 51% controlling interest. Effective immediately. I became majority owner and CEO this morning at 10:37 a.m. The color drained from Patricia's face. That's impossible. I'm the eldest. I'm the one who's been preparing to run the company. You're nobody. I'm William Price's granddaughter. The one who earned an MBA while working full-time. The one who built a successful consulting business from nothing. The one he trusted with his legacy. I met her eyes. The one who just spent 2 hours standing in your kitchen waiting for table scraps while you demonstrated exactly why he didn't trust you with anything beyond a trust fund. Patricia's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound brought Jeffrey and the others running from the living room. What's going on? Jeffrey demanded, looking at the broken glass, at Patricia's stricken expression. Vanessa is lying, Patricia said, her voice shaking. She's claiming grandfather left her Price Industries. It's insane. She's delusional. I have documentation. I forwarded the email to everyone in the room. All family, all people who'd watched me stand in the kitchen, all witnesses to how Patricia had treated me. The lawyers will notify the board Monday morning. But I wanted you all to know tonight, while we're gathered as family. Uncle Charles read the email on his phone. His face going pale. Vanessa, is this real? Dad left you controlling interest. 51% plus board appointment, plus CEO designation. He made the decision 2 weeks before he died. The lawyers have been managing the 6-month waiting period he specified. I looked at Patricia. He wanted me to see how you'd treat me before the transfer finalized. He said you'd reveal your true character. You exceeded his expectations. Patricia found her voice sharp with rage. This is fraud. He wasn't competent at the end. He was perfectly competent. The lawyers have medical documentation proving his mental clarity. They also have recordings of him explaining his reasoning, video testimony that will hold up in any court. I pulled up another document on my phone. He knew you'd challenge the will, Aunt Patricia. He prepared for it. Every medical test, every competency evaluation, every conversation with lawyers was documented. You can challenge, but you'll lose. Brittany, my cousin who'd smirked through dinner, spoke up. This isn't fair. My mother dedicated her life to this family. Your mother dedicated her life to spending money she didn't earn and positioning herself to inherit wealth she didn't create. Kept my voice level. Grandfather saw that clearly. He wanted Price Industries run by someone with integrity, vision, and work ethic. He chose me. Jeffrey, Patricia's husband, was scrolling through the email with increasing alarm. The transfer is already complete. This isn't pending probate. It went through this morning. I'm already the legal owner. The board notification Monday is a formality. I looked at Patricia. Grandfather was very clear. He didn't trust you with his life's work, and the last 6 months proved he was right to feel that way. Patricia's face had gone from pale to red, rage replacing shock. You manipulative little bitch. You planned this. You wormed your way into his good graces. I earned his respect by being exactly who I am. Someone who works hard, treats people with dignity, and doesn't measure worth by bank accounts. I gestured toward the dining room. You just made me wait 2 hours to eat your leftovers, Aunt Patricia. You served 12 people at a table that could have held 13, deliberately excluding me to demonstrate my inferior status in this family. That's who you are. You should be grateful I invited you at all. I was invited by Uncle Charles, and you made sure everyone knew you didn't want me here. I pulled up the photos I'd taken. I documented everything, just like grandfather suggested. Your treatment of me when you thought I was powerless. Your comments about selling Price Industries and laying off employees. Your contempt for the workers who built grandfather's fortune. Charles looked sick. Patricia, please tell me you didn't actually say you'd sell the company. I said it might be a smart business move. You said manufacturing is dying and you'd cash out for better returns. I played the recording, her voice clear and damning. You called 12,000 employees a liability to be eliminated for profit. Grandfather built that company over 50 years, employing generations of families, and you saw it as just an asset to liquidate. The room was silent. Brittany stared at her mother. Hayden had gone pale. Jeffrey's expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. Patricia grabbed my phone, trying to delete the recording. I stepped back smoothly. I'd been expecting that reaction. That's assault, Aunt Patricia. And the recording is already backed up to cloud storage. You can't delete evidence of your own words. She lunged at me then, actually lunged, hands outstretched like she intended to physically attack me. Jeffrey and Charles grabbed her, holding her back while she screamed incoherently about betrayal and theft and manipulation. I stood calmly, watching her lose control. This was exactly what grandfather had predicted. When Patricia realizes she's lost power, she'll reveal herself completely, he'd said. She'll abandon all pretense of civility. That's when you'll see who she really is, and so will everyone else. You're out of the family, Patricia shrieked, still struggling against Jeffrey and Charles. You're not welcome here, not welcome at any family event. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. What I did was inherit my grandfather's company because he trusted me to run it with integrity. My voice was steady, quiet, cutting through her hysteria. What you did was treat your niece like garbage because you thought you had all the power. You were wrong about the power. And everyone here saw exactly how you wielded what you thought you had. I looked around the room at the assembled family. Some looked shocked, some uncomfortable, some, like Charles, seemed almost relieved. Grandfather left very specific instructions. The trust fund for Aunt Patricia is contingent on her not challenging the will. If she files any legal action contesting the inheritance, the trust fund dissolves and the money goes to charity. That stopped Patricia's struggling. She stared at me, finally understanding the full scope of what grandfather had done. He made me choose between fighting for the company and keeping any money at all? He made you choose between accepting his decision with grace or revealing yourself as the greedy, vindictive person he suspected you were. Put my phone away. You get $200,000 a year for life if you accept this quietly. That's more than most people make. It's a comfortable life if you adjust your expectations. Adjust my expectations. Patricia's laugh was bitter. I'm supposed to live on $200,000 a year after expecting to control billions. You're supposed to live on money you didn't earn and be grateful someone is providing it. I picked up my coat. I'm leaving now. Thank you for the invitation to Thanksgiving dinner, Aunt Patricia, even if you never intended to actually feed me. It was very instructive. Charles stopped me at the door. Vanessa, wait. I owe you an apology. I saw how Patricia treated you and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that family harmony mattered more than standing up for you. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I met his eyes. But at least you invited me today. That's more than she would have done on her own. What happens now? With the company. I take over as CEO Monday morning. I've been studying Price Industries for 6 months, preparing for this. I have a management team ready, a strategic plan developed, and a very clear vision for the company's future. I smiled slightly. Grandfather didn't leave this to chance, Uncle Charles. He left detailed guidance, introduced me to key executives, made sure I understood every aspect of the business. I'm not walking in blind. Patricia will challenge this. Even if it costs her the trust fund, she'll fight. Let her. The will is airtight, his competency is documented, and his reasoning is clear. Any judge will see that a 93-year-old businessman with full mental capacity had every right to leave his company to whomever he chose. Open the door. Grandfather made his choice based on character and capability. Patricia just spent the evening demonstrating why he made the right choice. I drove home to my modest apartment, hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. The last 6 months had been preparation for this moment. Studying the company, developing relationships with key executives grandfather had introduced me to, learning everything about manufacturing operations, supply chains, and industry trends. Monday morning would bring new challenges. Taking control of a billion-dollar company at 28 would raise eyebrows. But grandfather had prepared me carefully, and I'd prepared myself thoroughly. The company would survive the transition, thrive even, under leadership that valued employees and long-term sustainability over short-term profits. My phone buzzed with text. Charles. I'm proud of you. Dad made the right choice. My cousin Brittany, surprisingly. I'm sorry about Mom. She's always been difficult, but tonight was inexcusable. Even Jeffrey. For what it's worth, she never told me about making you wait for leftovers. That was cruel. But nothing from Patricia. Not yet. That would come later, probably through lawyers, probably hostile. But I'd been preparing for that too. I spent the weekend reviewing transition plans, confirming Monday morning meetings with executives, preparing my first address to the board. Grandfather had recorded a video for this moment, a message to the board explaining his decision, his confidence in me, his explicit instructions that I be given full support. Some of you will doubt Vanessa's readiness, he said in the recording I'd watched dozens of times. You'll see her age, her lack of traditional corporate experience, and wonder if I made a mistake. I didn't. I chose her because she has what many executives lack: integrity that can't be purchased, work ethic that wasn't inherited, and genuine care for the people who make this company successful. She'll make mistakes, but she'll make them honestly, and she'll learn from them. That's worth more than decades of experience gained by prioritizing profit over people. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, confident but not arrogant. The Price Industries headquarters was downtown, a modern building housing executive offices, design departments, and administrative functions. The manufacturing facilities were spread across 7 states, employing the 12,000 workers Patricia had viewed as liabilities. I arrived early, meeting with Thomas Kirkland, the CEO who'd been running day-to-day operations. Thomas had worked with grandfather for 30 years, understood the company deeply, and had been part of the succession planning. Vanessa, welcome. The board is assembled. They're curious. Thomas smiled slightly. Your aunt has been calling board members all weekend, trying to undermine your authority before you even start. It hasn't worked. William was clear in his final communications with us. We're prepared to support your leadership. The boardroom was elegant. Large table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city. 15 people sat waiting, including Patricia, who looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, her expression hostile. Good morning, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Grandfather's seat, now mine. Thank you all for being here. I know this transition is unexpected for some of you. It's illegitimate, Patricia interrupted. My father wasn't competent to make this decision. I'm filing a legal challenge, which will cost you your trust fund, I interrupted calmly, and which will fail because your father documented everything thoroughly. But you're welcome to try if you're willing to accept the consequences. I opened my laptop and played grandfather's video message. The board watched in silence as he explained his reasoning, his confidence in me, his explicit instructions for support. When it finished, several board members were nodding. William was very clear, said Victoria Chen, the board's independent director. He wanted fresh leadership, someone who understood modern business but maintained traditional values. Based on this message, Ms. Price, you have my support. Mine as well, said Paul Henderson, who'd been grandfather's closest friend on the board. William discussed this with me extensively before he died. He believed Patricia would run the company into the ground through either poor management or premature sale. He trusted Vanessa to preserve his legacy. Patricia stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's 28 years old with no corporate experience. I have an MBA, 5 years running a successful consulting business, and 6 months of intensive preparation with your father. Kept my voice level. I've studied every aspect of Price Industries operations. I've met with department heads, reviewed financial statements, analyzed market trends, and developed a strategic plan that builds on your father's vision while adapting to current realities. I distributed copies of the strategic plan I developed. Detailed, comprehensive, showing clear understanding of the business. The board members paged through it, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest. This is actually quite good, Thomas said, reading through the operational efficiency proposals. These recommendations show real understanding of our manufacturing processes. Because I spent 2 weeks touring every facility, talking to floor managers, understanding bottlenecks and opportunities, I pulled up a presentation. Grandfather wanted someone who'd value the workers who make this company successful. I've prioritized improvements that increase efficiency while improving working conditions and wages. Profitable sustainability, not extraction. For the next hour I walked the board through my vision. Modernizing equipment, improving safety protocols, increasing wages and benefits, investing in training programs, developing new product lines that leveraged our manufacturing expertise. Every proposal was backed by data, research, and careful analysis. Patricia sat silently, realizing she had no comparable plan. She'd assumed inheriting meant controlling, not actually running the company. She'd never bothered learning the business because she'd only ever seen it as an asset to monetize. The question before this board, I concluded, is whether Price Industries exists to generate maximum short-term profit for shareholders, or to build long-term value while maintaining our responsibility to employees, communities, and the industry we serve. Grandfather believed in the latter. So do I. The board voted unanimously, except for Patricia's single dissenting vote, to confirm me as CEO and support the strategic plan. Thomas would continue as COO, providing operational expertise and institutional knowledge. We'd work together to implement changes carefully, preserving what worked while improving what didn't. After the meeting, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. This isn't over. I'll find something. Financial irregularities, conflicts of interest, something to prove you're unfit. You're welcome to look. My finances are completely transparent. I have no conflicts of interest, and everything I've done has been documented and legal. I met her eyes. The difference between us, Aunt Patricia, is that I don't have anything to hide. My success isn't built on deception or manipulation. It's built on actual work. You manipulated a dying old man. I earned his respect by being someone worth respecting. That's something you never understood how to do. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Aunt Patricia. That recording I made Thanksgiving night, where you discussed selling the company and laying off thousands of employees. I shared it with the board. They now understand exactly why grandfather didn't trust you with his legacy. Her face went pale. That was a private conversation. In a room where you knew I was present, where you said those things deliberately to hurt me because you thought I was powerless. You documented your own character. I just made sure the right people saw it. I walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway. The victory felt good but hollow. I hadn't wanted to inherit a company this way. Hadn't wanted family warfare. But Patricia had forced this confrontation through her own cruelty and greed. The next weeks were intensive. I moved into grandfather's old office, now mine, and began implementing changes. Meeting with department heads, touring facilities, learning names of workers Patricia had never bothered to learn. Understanding the business from ground level up, not just from profit statements. Thomas became an invaluable mentor, teaching me the unwritten rules of corporate leadership. Your grandfather was loved because he remembered people's names, asked about their families, showed up at facility events. The workers knew he saw them as humans, not just labor costs. I adopted that approach naturally. It aligned with who I was. I visited facilities regularly, ate lunch with floor workers, asked about their concerns and ideas. Word spread quickly that the new CEO was different from what they'd expected. A machinist named Carlos approached me during a facility tour. "Ms. Price, I worked here 37 years, since your grandfather opened this plant. He used to come through and talk to us, remember our kids' names. Miss Patricia never visited once. People were scared she'd take over and sell everything." "That's not happening," I assured him. "This company exists to manufacture excellent products while providing good jobs. Profit matters, but so do the people who make profit possible." His relief was visible. "Thank you. People are saying you're like your grandfather. That means something." Media attention was inevitable. 28-year-old inherits billion-dollar company. Made headlines nationally. Reporters wanted interviews, business schools wanted case studies. Everyone wanted to analyze how a young woman with unconventional background came to control a major manufacturing firm. I gave selective interviews, focusing on grandfather's vision and the strategic plan, deflecting attention from family drama. But one reporter asked directly, "Your Aunt Patricia has made public statements claiming the inheritance is illegitimate. How do you respond?" My grandfather was 93 years old, possessed full mental capacity, and had every right to leave his company to whomever he chose. He chose me based on character and capability. His decision is documented thoroughly, and I'm honored to fulfill his trust. "But your aunt claims you manipulated him." My aunt is disappointed she didn't inherit what she expected. That disappointment has led to accusations without foundation. The courts will handle any legal challenges, but I'm confident in both the legality and the wisdom of my grandfather's decision. Patricia did file legal challenges, as expected. She hired expensive lawyers, claimed undue influence, argued that grandfather's age invalidated his judgment. But the documentation was overwhelming. Medical records proving competency, video testimony explaining his reasoning, written statements from lawyers and doctors confirming his mental clarity. The judge dismissed her challenge within 3 months. Mr. William Price had absolute right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. His mental competency is thoroughly documented. Ms. Patricia Morton's disappointment, while understandable, does not constitute grounds to overturn a validly executed will. Case dismissed. Patricia's trust fund dissolved immediately per grandfather's specifications. Her $200,000 annual income vanished, replaced by nothing. She'd gambled everything on the legal challenge and lost. Charles called me after the ruling. Patricia is devastated. She spent the trust fund money before it even started, assuming she'd win the challenge. Now she's facing financial problems. She made her choice. He trusted Vanessa to preserve his legacy. Patricia stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's 28 years old with no corporate experience. I have an MBA, 5 years running a successful consulting business, and 6 months of intensive preparation with your father." Kept my voice level. "I've studied every aspect of Price Industries operations. I've met with department heads, reviewed financial statements, analyzed market trends, and developed a strategic plan that builds on your father's vision while adapting to current realities. I distributed copies of the strategic plan I developed. Detailed, comprehensive, showing clear understanding of the business. The board members paged through it, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest. "This is actually quite good," Thomas said, reading through the operational efficiency proposals. "These recommendations show real understanding of our manufacturing processes." Because I spent 2 weeks touring every facility, talking to floor managers, understanding bottlenecks and opportunities, I pulled up a presentation. Grandfather wanted someone who'd value the workers who make this company successful. I've prioritized improvements that increase efficiency while improving working conditions and wages. Profitable sustainability, not extraction. For the next hour I walked the board through my vision. Modernizing equipment, improving safety protocols, increasing wages and benefits, investing in training programs, developing new product lines that leveraged our manufacturing expertise. Every proposal was backed by data, research, and careful analysis. Patricia sat silently, realizing she had no comparable plan. She'd assumed inheriting meant controlling, not actually running the company. She'd never bothered learning the business because she'd only ever seen it as an asset to monetize. The question before this board, I concluded, is whether Price Industries exists to generate maximum short-term profit for shareholders, or to build long-term value while maintaining our responsibility to employees, communities, and the industry we serve. Grandfather believed in the latter. So do I. The board voted unanimously, except for Patricia's single dissenting vote, to confirm me as CEO and support the strategic plan. Thomas would continue as COO, providing operational expertise and institutional knowledge. We'd work together to implement changes carefully, preserving what worked while improving what didn't. After the meeting, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. "This isn't over. I'll find something. Financial irregularities, conflicts of interest, something to prove you're unfit. You're welcome to look. My finances are completely transparent. I have no conflicts of interest, and everything I've done has been documented and legal." I met her eyes. "The difference between us, Aunt Patricia, is that I don't have anything to hide. My success isn't built on deception or manipulation. It's built on actual work. You manipulated a dying old man. I earned his respect by being someone worth respecting. That's something you never understood how to do." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Aunt Patricia, that recording I made Thanksgiving night, where you discussed selling the company and laying off thousands of employees. I shared it with the board. They now understand exactly why Grandfather didn't trust you with his legacy." Her face went pale. "That was a private conversation. In a room where you knew I was present, where you said those things deliberately to hurt me because you thought I was powerless. You documented your own character. I just made sure the right people saw it." I walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway. The victory felt good but hollow. I hadn't wanted to inherit a company this way. Hadn't wanted family warfare. But Patricia had forced this confrontation through her own cruelty and greed. The next weeks were intensive. I moved into Grandfather's old office, now mine, and began implementing changes. Meeting with department heads, touring facilities, learning names of workers Patricia had never bothered to learn. Understanding the business from ground level up, not just from profit statements. Thomas became an invaluable mentor, teaching me the unwritten rules of corporate leadership. Your grandfather was loved because he remembered people's names, asked about their families, showed up at facility events. The workers knew he saw them as humans, not just labor costs. I adopted that approach naturally. It aligned with who I was. I visited facilities regularly, ate lunch with floor workers, asked about their concerns and ideas. Word spread quickly that the new CEO was different from what they'd expected. A machinist named Carlos approached me during a facility tour. "Ms. Price, I worked here 37 years, since your grandfather opened this plant. He used to come through and talk to us, remember our kids' names. Miss Patricia never visited once. People were scared she'd take over and sell everything." "That's not happening," I assured him. "This company exists to manufacture excellent products while providing good jobs. Profit matters, but so do the people who make profit possible." His relief was visible. "Thank you. People are saying you're like your grandfather. That means something." Media attention was inevitable. 28-year-old inherits billion-dollar company. Made headlines nationally. Reporters wanted interviews, business schools wanted case studies. Everyone wanted to analyze how a young woman with unconventional background came to control a major manufacturing firm. I gave selective interviews, focusing on Grandfather's vision and the strategic plan, deflecting attention from family drama. But one reporter asked directly, "Your Aunt Patricia has made public statements claiming the inheritance is illegitimate. How do you respond?" My grandfather was 93 years old, possessed full mental capacity, and had every right to leave his company to whomever he chose. He chose me based on character and capability. His decision is documented thoroughly, and I'm honored to fulfill his trust. But your aunt claims you manipulated him. My aunt is disappointed she didn't inherit what she expected. That disappointment has led to accusations without foundation. The courts will handle any legal challenges, but I'm confident in both the legality and the wisdom of my grandfather's decision. Patricia did file legal challenges, as expected. She hired expensive lawyers, claimed undue influence, argued that grandfather's age invalidated his judgment. But the documentation was overwhelming. Medical records proving competency, video testimony explaining his reasoning, written statements from lawyers and doctors confirming his mental clarity. The judge dismissed her challenge within 3 months. Mr. William Price had absolute right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. His mental competency is thoroughly documented. Ms. Patricia Morton's disappointment, while understandable, does not constitute grounds to overturn a validly executed will. Case dismissed. Patricia's trust fund dissolved immediately per grandfather's specifications. Her $200,000 annual income vanished, replaced by nothing. She'd gambled everything on the legal challenge and lost. Charles called me after the ruling. Patricia is devastated. She spent the trust fund money before it even started, assuming she'd win the challenge. Now she's facing financial problems. She made her choice. Grandfather gave her a generous income for life if she accepted his decision with grace. She chose greed over gratitude. I know. But she's still my sister and she's struggling. He paused. I'm not asking you to give her money. I just wanted you to know the situation. I appreciate you telling me. I considered carefully. If she's genuinely struggling with necessities, housing, medical care, food, I'll help. Not because she deserves it, but because I'm not going to let family become destitute. But luxury expenses, lifestyle maintenance, the things she expects, those she'll have to figure out herself. Charles's relief was audible. Thank you. That's more generous than she deserves. It's what grandfather would have done. He was ruthless in business but compassionate about actual need. I'm trying to follow his example. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, Price Industries was thriving. The strategic plan was working. Modernized equipment, improved safety protocols, increased wages, and new product lines were generating both better profits and better working conditions. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement. The board had evolved from skeptical to supportive. Vanessa, your grandfather made the right choice, Victoria Chan told me after a quarterly review. You've increased profitability while actually improving employee welfare. That's rare in modern corporate leadership. Because I don't see those goals as conflicting. Happy employees are productive employees. Safe working conditions reduce accidents and insurance costs. Fair wages reduce turnover and training expenses. Treating people well is good business. Your aunt would have sold everything within a year. We'd all be looking for new board positions and 12,000 people would be job hunting. Victoria smiled. Instead, we're expanding operations and hiring. That matters. Media coverage shifted from skeptical to impressed. Business publications featured Price Industries as a case study in successful generational transition. How a young CEO modernized a family business while preserving its values. Read one headline. I started speaking at business schools, sharing lessons about ethical leadership, long-term thinking, and the importance of valuing all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Students responded enthusiastically, hungry for alternatives to the profit-at-all-costs mentality they saw dominating corporate culture. My personal life remained modest. I'd moved from my small apartment to a comfortable house near headquarters, but nothing extravagant. I drove a reliable car, dressed professionally but not ostentatiously, saved money rather than spending on luxury. You're worth hundreds of millions and you drive a Honda? Thomas teased me one day. It's a reliable car that gets me where I need to go. Why would I spend money on something flashier just to impress people I don't care about? Smiled. Grandfather drove a Ford for 40 years. He said expensive cars were for people with nothing interesting to say. 1 year into my tenure, Patricia requested a meeting. She came to my office looking diminished, older, tired, wearing clothes that were expensive but no longer new. The confidence and cruelty that had defined her were gone, replaced by something like humility. "Vanessa, I came to apologize." She sat across from my desk, hands folded in her lap. "Everything you said at Thanksgiving was true. I treated you terribly because I thought I had all the power. I was wrong." I waited, saying nothing. "I've lost almost everything. Jeffrey left me. Apparently he married me for my father's money and connections, and once those were gone, so was he. My friends have disappeared. My children barely speak to me." Her voice cracked. "I'm living with Charles now, in his guest room, dependent on his charity. I'm sorry your life is difficult. But Patricia, you created these circumstances through your own choices." "I know." She wiped tears away. "I challenged the will out of greed and lost everything. I treated you like garbage because I thought you were powerless. I planned to sell my father's company without caring about the thousands of employees who'd lose their jobs. I was horrible." "Yes, you were." Kept my voice neutral. "What do you want from me now?" "Nothing. Maybe understanding. Maybe just acknowledgement that I see what I did wrong." She looked at me directly. "You were right. Father chose correctly. You've done amazing things with Price Industries. Everything I've read about your leadership, about the changes you've implemented, it's what he would have wanted. I would have destroyed it." The admission seemed genuine, hard-won. "Thank you for saying that. Are you open to having any kind of relationship? Not like before. I know we can't go back. But maybe eventually something civil." She asked it hesitantly, like expecting rejection. I considered carefully. "I'm open to civility. You're family and I don't want warfare. But Patricia, trust is earned. You hurt me repeatedly, treated me with contempt, then tried to destroy what grandfather left me. Forgiveness is possible, but it's a process, not an immediate decision. I understand. That's more than I deserve." She stood to leave, then paused. "Your mother would be proud of you. She always was, even when I criticized her choices. She'd love knowing you're running Dad's company with integrity." After she left, I sat quietly processing. Patricia's apology seemed genuine, but time would tell if she'd actually changed or was just adapting to circumstances. Either way, I wouldn't let my guard down completely. Grandfather's lessons about documenting everything, protecting myself, and trusting cautiously had proven too valuable. 2 years into my tenure, Price Industries celebrated its 50th anniversary. We held a company-wide event, bringing together employees from all 7 facilities, celebrating 5 decades of manufacturing excellence. I gave a speech honoring grandfather's vision, the workers who'd built the company, and the future we were building together. William Price founded this company on simple principles: make excellent products, treat employees fairly, contribute to communities, build something lasting. Those principles still guide us today. Carlos, the machinist who'd approached me 2 years ago, stood to speak during the employee recognition portion. "I've worked here 39 years now. I've seen a lot of changes, 3 different generations of leadership. Ms. Vanessa is the best leader this company has had. She learned all our names. She listens to our ideas. She invested in our facilities and our wages. She treats us like we matter." The applause was thunderous. I felt tears forming, not from sentiment, but from recognition that I'd succeeded at the thing that mattered most. The workers felt valued, heard, essential to our shared success. That had been grandfather's true legacy, far more important than the billions in company value. After the event, Thomas found me in my office. "Vanessa, I'm retiring next year. I've been doing this for 35 years and it's time." "Thomas, you've been invaluable. And I'll leave the company in excellent hands. You've learned everything you needed, built a strong management team, earned the employees' loyalty. You don't need me anymore." He smiled. "That's the sign of successful mentorship, when the student surpasses the teacher. I'll never surpass you. But I appreciate your confidence." Pause. Help me find your replacement. Someone who shares our values, who understands that profit and people aren't competing interests. Already have someone in mind. Angela Martinez. She's been running our Midwest operations for 8 years. Brilliant strategist, loved by her team. Exactly the kind of leader you need. Thomas handed me her file. She'd be perfect. Over the next months, I worked with Angela, preparing her for the COO transition. She was everything Thomas promised. Smart, ethical, committed to the values that made Price Industries special. Her promotion sent a message throughout the company. Leadership was earned through excellence and integrity, not politics or favoritism. 3 years into my tenure, business schools started teaching Price Industries as a case study in stakeholder capitalism. How one company balanced profit with purpose became the narrative, with my leadership highlighted as proof that ethical business could be financially successful. I was invited to speak at conferences, to join panels about the future of manufacturing, to consult with other companies trying to build sustainable business models. The attention was flattering but also exhausting. I was running a billion-dollar company, which left limited time for external commitments. "You're becoming famous," my assistant pointed out, showing me another speaking invitation. "Harvard Business School wants you for their annual leadership forum. Tell them I'm honored, but the company comes first. Maybe next year when things are less intense." I returned to reviewing expansion plans for our Tennessee facility. Patricia and I had developed a cautious, distant relationship. We attended family events together, were civil and occasionally warm, but never close. She'd gotten a job, administrative work at a nonprofit, modest salary, nothing like her former lifestyle, and seemed to be building something genuine for the first time. "I'm actually good at this work," she told me at a family dinner. Helping coordinate programs, managing donations, interacting with people who need support. It matters in ways spending money never did. "I'm glad you found something meaningful." Meant it. Her transformation wasn't complete or perfect, but it was real progress. Brittany, my cousin, had surprised everyone by going back to school for social work. "Watching you build something real made me examine my own life," she explained. "I've been living off family money and pursuing nothing. That needed to change." Hayden was less transformed but more respectful. He'd started a business, legitimate, requiring actual work, and occasionally asked me for advice. The sneering superiority he'd shown at that Thanksgiving dinner had disappeared. Charles remained my closest family connection. He'd supported me consistently, attended board meetings as observer, and become something like a father figure after my own father had died when I was young. "Your mother would be so proud," he told me on what would have been her birthday. "She always knew you were special, that you'd do something significant. She just didn't live long enough to see it. Grandfather saw it. That's why he left me everything, not just the company, but the opportunity to build something that mattered." I looked at the photo of my mother I kept on my desk. I'm trying to honor both their legacies. 4 years into my tenure, Price Industries hit a major milestone. Revenue exceeded $2 billion for the first time. We'd doubled in size since I'd taken over, through careful expansion, strategic acquisitions, and developing new product lines. The board celebrated with champagne, toasting the success. Victoria raised her glass. To Vanessa, who proved that young, ethical leadership can build extraordinary value. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud." To grandfather, I corrected, who had the courage to choose character over convention. This success is his legacy, maintained through all of you and the 12,000 employees who do the actual work. Later, alone in my office, I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago. Standing in Patricia's kitchen, watching people eat while I waited for scraps, feeling invisible and powerless. That moment had been humiliating, but it had also been clarifying. Patricia had treated me with contempt because she'd thought she could, because she'd measured my worth by my circumstances rather than my character. She'd been wrong about the power dynamics, wrong about my value, wrong about almost everything. But her cruelty had served a purpose. It had revealed exactly who she was, To me, to grandfather's lawyers who saw the photos and recordings, to the family who'd watched it happen. Her treatment of me had documented her character more effectively than any investigation could have. And it had motivated me. Every time I'd felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of running a billion-dollar company, I'd remembered standing in that kitchen. Every time I doubted my capabilities, I'd thought about Patricia's dismissive comments about my adorable consulting business. That anger had been fuel. I'd channeled it into determination, into proving that success could be built on integrity rather than cruelty, that leadership was about service rather than status, that worth wasn't determined by inheritance or appearance. 5 years after taking over, I established the William Price Foundation for Ethical Business Leadership. The foundation provided scholarships for first-generation college students pursuing business degrees, funded research into stakeholder capitalism, and created fellowship programs placing young leaders in companies committed to ethical practices. "This is your grandfather's legacy continuing," Thomas said at the foundation's launch event. He'd retired but stayed involved as advisor. Not just the company but the values. "You're training the next generation to lead the way he led." Patricia attended the launch, sitting in the back quietly. Afterward, she approached with tears in her eyes. "This is beautiful, Vanessa. Dad would love this. Come work with the foundation if you want. We need people who understand business but prioritize people. You've learned those lessons the hard way. That might make you an effective teacher." I offered it genuinely, testing whether her transformation was deep enough for real collaboration. She looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I'd like that. If you trust me enough to let me be involved." "Trust is earned, Patricia. But I'm willing to give you the opportunity to earn it." Meant it. People could change if they chose to do the work. Patricia had lost everything and built something modest but real. Maybe she'd earned a second chance. The foundation became Patricia's purpose. She worked with students from difficult backgrounds, sharing her own story of entitlement leading to loss, of learning humility through consequences. Her honesty about her failures made her credible in ways her former arrogance never had. "I tell students that I had everything: money, status, family, business to inherit, and I lost it all because I valued the wrong things," she explained at a foundation event. "Then I watch Vanessa, who had so much less, build something extraordinary because she valued the right things. That's the lesson. Character matters more than circumstances." 6 years into my tenure, Price Industries was flourishing beyond anyone's expectations. Revenue had grown to $2.4 billion. We employed over 15,000 people, and employee satisfaction scores were the highest in our industry. The company was profitable, ethical, and sustainable. But more importantly, we'd proved that business could be done differently. That maximizing shareholder value and treating employees well weren't competing goals. That long-term thinking built more value than short-term extraction. That ethical leadership wasn't naive, it was strategic. Other companies started copying our model. CEOs called asking for advice about implementing stakeholder capitalism. Business schools studied our practices, our culture, our results. Price Industries became proof that there was an alternative to the race-to-the-bottom mentality dominating corporate America. I was invited to testify before Congress about manufacturing policy, about the importance of valuing workers, about building sustainable businesses. Politicians across the spectrum praised Price Industries as an example of capitalism working for everyone, not just shareholders. The attention was gratifying but also overwhelming. I was still just Vanessa, the woman who'd stood in a kitchen waiting for leftover turkey, who'd inherited a company she'd barely understood, who'd been terrified of failing her grandfather's trust. "You've become a symbol," Charles told me after a particularly intense media week. "People see you as proof that ethical business is possible, that young leaders can succeed, that companies can prioritize more than just profit." "I'm not a symbol. I'm just someone trying to run a company the way grandfather taught me." I felt the weight of expectations that had nothing to do with manufacturing or business strategy. "You're both. And that's powerful, even if it's uncomfortable." He smiled. "But don't lose yourself in the symbolism. You're still the person who drove a Honda when you inherited billions. Stay that person. 7 years after taking over, I received a letter that made me cry. It was from Carlos, the machinist who'd worked at Price Industries for over 40 years. Dear Ms. Vanessa, I'm retiring next month after 43 years with this company. I wanted to write and thank you for the last 7 years. When your grandfather died, we were scared. We'd heard rumors about Miss Patricia wanting to sell everything. We thought we'd lose our jobs, our pensions, everything we'd worked for. Then you took over and everything changed. You invested in our facilities. You increased our wages. You asked our opinions and actually listened. You treated us like we mattered. I'm retiring with a good pension, with pride in the work I did, with gratitude for a company that valued me. Thank you for being the leader we needed. Your grandfather chose well. Respectfully, Carlos Mendoza. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, next to grandfather's photo and the picture of my mother. These were the things that mattered. Not revenue growth or stock prices or business school case studies, but the lives affected, the families supported, the dignity preserved. That Thanksgiving, 7 years after the dinner where Patricia had made me wait for scraps, I hosted the family gathering. Not at a mansion with catered food and designer place settings, but at my comfortable house with homemade dishes and mismatched chairs pulled from different rooms to fit everyone. Patricia arrived early to help cook. We worked together in the kitchen, comfortable in silence that had taken years to build. Thank you for inviting me, she said quietly. After everything I did, I didn't expect to be included. You've spent 7 years proving you've changed. That earns consideration. I handed her vegetables to chop. Besides, grandfather would want family together, even imperfect family with complicated history. Charles arrived with his family. Brittany brought her new boyfriend, a teacher she'd met through social work school. Hayden came with his business partner, excited to tell me about their company's first profitable quarter. The house filled with family who'd learned, grown, and changed. We sat down to dinner together, all of us at one table, no one excluded or diminished. I looked around at these people, flawed, complicated, but trying to be better, and felt something like peace. I'd like to say something, I began, standing with my glass. 7 years ago, I stood in a kitchen waiting for leftover turkey, feeling invisible and worthless. That moment was terrible, but it was also clarifying. It showed me who people really were when they thought they had power over me. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but I continued gently. It also showed me who I was. Someone who could endure humiliation without losing dignity. Someone who could channel pain into purpose. Someone who could build something meaningful when given the opportunity. Grandfather saw that in me. He gave me the chance to prove it. I raised my glass. So I'm grateful. Grateful for grandfather's trust. Grateful for the family who supported me. Grateful even for the hardship that tested me. All of it made me who I am. The CEO of a company I love, leading with values I believe in, surrounded by people who've earned their place at this table through growth and change. To Vanessa, Charles said, raising his glass. And to second chances. To second chances. Everyone echoed, even Patricia. We ate together, laughed together, celebrated together. No one was excluded. No one was diminished. Just family, imperfect but genuine, sharing a meal and gratitude. Later, after everyone left, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and thought about the journey. From powerless niece to CEO of a billion-dollar company. From waiting for scraps to deciding who sat at the table. From invisible to influential. But the real transformation wasn't about power or wealth or status. It was about discovering that my worth had never depended on Patricia's approval or grandfather's inheritance or anyone's validation. I'd always been valuable, smart, capable, principled. I just needed the opportunity to prove it. That Thanksgiving dinner 7 years ago, when Patricia forced me to wait for leftovers, she thought she was demonstrating my inferior position in the family hierarchy. Instead, she documented her own character so thoroughly that grandfather's lawyers had used it as evidence of why his decision was correct. She'd humiliated me in front of witnesses, recorded on my phone, preserved for posterity. That cruelty had backfired spectacularly, costing her everything she'd expected to inherit, but it had also given me something invaluable. Proof that I could handle injustice with dignity, that I could recognize my worth even when others didn't, that I could transform pain into purpose. I'd quietly signed papers that made me sole owner of a billion-dollar company. But the real victory wasn't the inheritance. The real victory was becoming someone worthy of that inheritance. Someone who led with integrity, valued people over profit, and built something meaningful that would outlast me. Grandfather had seen that potential in me. He'd trusted me with his legacy, knowing I'd honor it. 7 years of leadership had proved him right. Patricia had seen only a powerless niece waiting for table scraps. She'd been spectacularly wrong about everything. My worth, my capabilities, my future. That mistake had cost her billions. But it had revealed truths worth more than money. That character matters more than status, that integrity outlasts cruelty, and that sometimes the people who seem powerless are just waiting for their moment to prove what they're actually worth. I finished the dishes, turned off the lights, and looked at grandfather's photo one more time. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when others didn't. For trusting me when others wouldn't. For giving me the chance to prove them all wrong." His smile seemed to answer. "You were always enough, Vanessa. You just needed the opportunity to show it." And I had. To the board, to the employees, to the industry, to the world. But most importantly, to myself. That was the real inheritance. Not the company or the wealth, but the self-knowledge that came from being tested and not breaking, from being doubted and proving capable, from being humiliated and choosing dignity over bitterness. I'd been forced to wait for leftovers when my aunt served dinner. Then I'd quietly signed papers that changed everything. But the signature on those documents wasn't the moment that mattered most. The moment that mattered was choosing to stay in that kitchen, to endure the humiliation with grace, to document the cruelty without responding in kind, to remember that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me. That choice, to maintain dignity when stripped of power, to hold on to values when tested by injustice, that was what made me worthy of grandfather's trust. The company was worth billions. But I was priceless. And no amount of inheritance could have taught me that lesson. Only standing in that kitchen, waiting for scraps while holding on to my humanity, could have revealed what I was actually worth. Everything else was just documentation of what grandfather had already known, that the truest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in character forged through fire and refined by choosing integrity even when it costs everything. I'd paid that price. And I'd inherited something far more valuable than a billion-dollar company. I'd inherited myself.